He spat in her face in front of the entire court. A prince drunk on arrogance, power, and the illusion that he could crush her dignity with a single word. Filth, he called her. The hall erupted in laughter, nobles sneering behind jeweled masks, servants lowering their eyes in fear. But the woman he humiliated did not weep. She simply stood there, silent, still, her gaze colder than the marble pillars that surrounded them. In that moment, no one realized they had just witnessed the beginning of a downfall that would echo through generations. Because years later, that same prince would kneel before her, trembling, and kiss her ring, whispering the very word he once mocked her with, majesty. This is not a tale of fantasy. It is a story written in blood, power, and revenge. A story history tried to bury under the weight of shame. Stay with us till the end. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories that reveal how pride, cruelty, and fate can turn kings into beggars and outcasts into legends. The year was 1871, a time when the air in Europe carried the weight of revolutions and retribution. Empires trembled, thrones cracked, and the poor had begun to whisper about justice. Yet inside the gilded walls of Valemont Palace, cruelty still wore perfume and lace. Elara Voss arrived there not by invitation, but by necessity. She was the daughter of a fallen baron, a man who'd gambled away his land and life in a single night of cards. When he died, his debts were inherited by her. She had nowhere to go except to the palace, where her aunt worked as a governess to the royal children. Elara entered that world like a shadow among stars, unnoticed and unwelcomed. The prince, Adrian Valemont, noticed her first not because of beauty, but because of defiance. While most women at court giggled to please him, she didn't even bow. Her silence irritated him. Her restraint intrigued him. Adrian was the kind of man who saw every soul as something to possess or humiliate. To him, Elara was an insolence that needed correction. The first humiliation came during a banquet meant to celebrate his return from the Southern Wars. Elara had been assigned to assist the kitchen staff, but a spilled glass of red wine, not her doing, became her undoing. The stain reached the prince's boots. He turned, his face cold and theatrical, as the entire hall fell silent. "Who did this?" he demanded. Elara stepped forward, steadying her voice. "It was an accident, Your Grace." He walked toward her slowly, the kind of slow that tastes of cruelty. And then, before everyone, he spat, the gesture sharp, deliberate, meant to remind her of her place. "You are filth," he said, voice low but cutting through the air like a blade, born of thieves and gamblers. "Do not forget that you are here because pity allows you to exist." The hall erupted in laughter. The nobles clapped, and even her aunt turned away, afraid to show sympathy. Elara didn't flinch. She just stood there, her eyes locked on his, and that moment, though silent, carved something irreversible between them. She could have left that night. She could have fled the palace, lived a quiet, invisible life. But something inside her refused. Not pride, not entirely, but a sense that fate had placed her within these walls for a reason. Weeks passed. The prince's insults became quieter but more calculated. He'd summon her for trivial reasons, to pour his drink, to clean a table, to deliver letters, just to watch her endure it. He wanted her submission. What he found instead was resilience. Each time he tried to break her, she seemed to harden like steel struck by flame. And then came the winter of the Grand Inspection, the event where nobles displayed their estates' reports to the royal family. Elara's aunt fell ill, and the queen, desperate and distrustful of court women, appointed Elara as a temporary clerk to record accounts. For the first time, she sat at the edge of the royal council chamber, taking notes in silence as men debated policies and taxes. There she listened, truly listened. She discovered that beneath Adrian's arrogance lay something darker: desperation. The war he'd returned from was not the victory the kingdom believed. Valemont's forces were near bankrupt. Grain was scarce, soldiers unpaid. Adrian's charm and brutality were merely masks to hide the truth. His dynasty was rotting from within. Elara began to see the court differently. The same nobles who laughed at her were stealing from the treasury. The same prince who mocked her was being manipulated by foreign lenders and scheming advisors. She saw it all, and she remembered every detail. By spring, her aunt passed away. Elara inherited nothing except knowledge powerful enough to destroy reputations and alter destinies. But she said nothing. She stayed in the shadows, observing, waiting, until one night, fate handed her a weapon. It was during a storm. Adrian's private secretary, drunk and careless, left a ledger unattended in the council room. Elara found it, pages filled with transactions, secret payments, and evidence of the prince's embezzlement. It was the kind of document that could ruin him. She should have been afraid to even look at it. Instead, she smiled, faintly, coldly, and slipped it into her satchel. The next morning, Adrian summoned her again. He accused her of something absurd: stealing silverware from the dining hall. The court gathered to watch the spectacle. Once again, the prince stood tall, ready to humiliate her before everyone. But this time, Elara's eyes held no fear. When he raised his hand to strike her, she interrupted him, her voice calm, sharp as glass. "Be careful, Your Grace," she said. "Some stains don't wash off as easily as wine." The hall went silent. Adrian froze, confusion flickering behind his arrogance. Because for the first time, the girl he'd called filth was no longer beneath him. She was holding something invisible, something powerful. And though no one else knew it yet, the fall of Prince Adrian Valemont had already begun. The following weeks turned the palace into a stage of quiet warfare. On the surface, nothing had changed. Elara still wore the same plain gowns, still bowed when the queen passed, still carried trays and papers through the marble corridors. But beneath that calm exterior, something invisible shifted. She had become a ghost in silk, watching, remembering, waiting. Prince Adrian, unaware of what she possessed, continued his games of power. He summoned her for petty tasks, polishing his boots, arranging documents, not realizing that the same hands touching his letters now held his ruin. But soon even he sensed something strange. The girl who once trembled in his presence now met his gaze without flinching. There was no defiance, only quiet knowledge, and that unnerved him more than open rebellion ever could. One afternoon, during council preparations, she placed before him a sealed envelope. "A report from the Treasury, Your Grace," she said. He opened it absent-mindedly, only to find a single page of his own handwriting staring back at him, a record from the missing ledger. Adrian's eyes lifted sharply to hers. "Where did you get this?" Elara bowed slightly, her tone measured. "From where you left it, Your Grace." For the first time, the prince didn't insult her. He only stared, the color draining from his face. When she turned to leave, he called after her, "You think you can threaten me?" She paused at the door. "No," she said. "You've already threatened yourself." That night, Adrian drank more than he ever had before. The echo of her voice haunted him. Every whisper of the court felt like a conspiracy. He ordered his secretary to burn any record of his debts, to silence anyone who'd seen the ledger. But rumors travel faster than fire, and by morning, half the palace servants whispered of forged accounts and missing gold. Still, no one dared speak it aloud. No one except Elara. Days later, when the Queen called for a review of the royal accounts, Elara requested to assist the auditors. It was a bold move, one that startled even the ministers. The Queen, tired of endless mismanagement, allowed it. Elara sat quietly through every meeting, asking simple questions, tracing inconsistencies no one else dared highlight. The nobles laughed at her, but each laugh grew shorter as her findings piled up. By the end of the week, whispers turned to accusations. "The treasury bleeds," one advisor murmured. "The prince's campaigns drain it dry." Another dared to suggest investigation, and suddenly, the court that once cheered Adrian now looked away when he entered. He began to unravel. He confronted Elara in the garden, far from prying eyes. "What do you want?" he hissed. Her answer came without hesitation. "Justice." For what? For a few cruel words? "No," she said softly. "For every person you've crushed, because you thought your blood made you divine." He stepped closer, jaw tight. "You think you're better than me?" She looked at him, truly looked at him. "No, just freer." He struck the marble railing beside her instead of her face, veins trembling with rage. "If you destroy me, you destroy this kingdom." Elara turned, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then perhaps it deserves to be destroyed." The next morning, the palace erupted with news. The Queen had ordered a full audit, led by neutral officials from the capital. Adrian was summoned to defend his accounts. For the first time, he had no answers, only excuses. The evidence Elara had quietly gathered was overwhelming. But even as he fell, She didn't celebrate. She watched him with a strange calm, almost pity. Power had shifted, yet she knew victory came with a price. The court now looked at her with both awe and fear. Whispers followed her down the corridors. The governess's niece, the common girl who cornered a prince. One evening, an unexpected visitor came to her chambers, the queen herself. The air was thick with perfume and authority. "You humiliated my son," the queen said coldly, "and yet I cannot deny that you saved this house from disgrace." Elara lowered her eyes. "I only revealed the truth, Your Majesty." The queen studied her for a long moment before setting down a sealed document on the table. "From today, you are appointed to oversee the Royal Charitable Council. Use your knowledge for something greater than vengeance." Elara bowed, but her mind burned. The queen's grace wasn't mercy. It was control. The monarchy couldn't punish Elara without confirming Adrian's crimes, so they elevated her instead, making her both symbol and prisoner. Meanwhile, Adrian vanished from court life. Officially, he was said to be recuperating abroad. In truth, he had been sent to a distant estate under watch. Stripped of influence, haunted by shame, he lived like a ghost, his letters to his mother unanswered, his title a hollow echo. Months passed. The kingdom stabilized. Under Elara's management, funds returned to the poor, schools reopened, and the queen's popularity soared. To the people, Elara became a symbol of virtue, a woman who rose from nothing to cleanse corruption. But inside her, the old wound still pulsed. The image of that night, the laughter, the humiliation, the spit on her face, never faded. And then one evening, a sealed letter arrived at her desk. The handwriting was shaky, familiar. "Meet me," it read, "at Valemont Abbey. Alone." She stared at the words for a long time before folding them carefully. The signature was simple, almost tragic. Adrian. She should have burned it. Instead, she packed her cloak and rode out before dawn. When she arrived, the abbey was silent, the corridors lit only by flickering candles. A lone figure waited near the altar, older, thinner, but unmistakable. Adrian turned slowly to face her. His eyes were hollow, but his voice still carried that old steel. "You took everything from me," he said. Elara met his gaze calmly. "No, you gave it away." But before she could speak again, he stepped closer, and she saw something glint in his hand. It wasn't gold. It wasn't a letter. It was a dagger. The storm outside the abbey mirrored the silence inside, a silence heavy enough to drown in. Wind howled through the broken stained glass, scattering light across the cold stone floor where Elara stood. Adrian's hand trembled as the dagger caught a flicker of flame. He was thinner, his once impeccable uniform replaced by a plain, frayed coat. The arrogance that once dripped from every word was gone. In its place stood something more dangerous: desperation. "After everything," Elara said quietly, "you still think violence will save you?" Adrian laughed, but it wasn't mockery. It was madness. Save me? Number. Nothing can save me. You made sure of that. He stepped forward, each echo of his boots closing the distance. Do you know what it's like to watch servants turn away when you speak? To have the same nobles who bowed to you whisper your name like a curse? You took my world from me, Elara, and you expect me to live? Her voice was steady, but her hands tightened around the folds of her cloak. You built that world on cruelty. I didn't destroy it, Adrian. I revealed it. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, now burned with something raw. You think you're a savior, but you're just like me, ruthless when it suits you. The dagger lowered slightly, his arm trembling. Rain thundered above. Elara took a step forward. Then do it, she said. If killing me gives you peace, do it. But remember, it won't change the truth. You were born with everything, and you lost it because you couldn't see beyond your own pride. For a moment, his expression flickered, between hatred and heartbreak, fury and exhaustion. The dagger slipped from his hand, clattering onto the stone. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty hall. Adrian sank to his knees, hands shaking, breath uneven. I wanted to hate you, he said softly. But every day I thought of you, I realized I envied you. You had nothing, and yet you became everything. Elara looked down at him, her face unreadable. You envied me because you mistook endurance for power. You still don't understand. I never wanted your throne. I wanted justice. He laughed bitterly. And what is justice now? The same council that praised you has already begun to poison your name. The queen is dying. When she's gone, they'll turn on you. That pierced her composure. What are you talking about? Adrian looked up, eyes wet, but lucid. They'll never let a commoner hold what I lost. The nobles hate you more than they ever hated me. You think they respect you, Elara? They're just waiting for you to fall. A shiver passed through her, not of fear, but of realization. The room suddenly felt colder. Everything she'd built, the reforms, the schools, the policies, could crumble the moment her title lost royal protection. She had won against one tyrant, but the empire itself was still rotten. You're lying, she whispered. He smiled sadly. Am I? Footsteps echoed from the outer hall, hurried, armored, deliberate. Before Elara could turn, soldiers entered the abbey. Their leader, wearing the crest of the royal guard, spoke with grave formality. Elara Voss, by decree of the High Council, you are under arrest for treason and financial misconduct. She froze. Treason? The guard's voice did not falter. You have been accused of embezzlement and abuse of office. Evidence was presented this morning. Elara turned to Adrian, but he wasn't smirking. His expression was blank, almost wounded. I warned you, he said. They never needed proof. Only an excuse. The soldiers seized her arms. She didn't struggle. Her mind was racing. Someone had forged documents, likely the same nobles she'd exposed. The timing was perfect. The queen's illness, the political vacuum, the lingering resentment toward a woman who'd risen too high. As they dragged her away, Adrian stood slowly, watching her with something close to regret. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I didn't do this." Elara stopped in the doorway, rain washing over her face. "No," she replied, "but you taught them how." The door slammed shut behind her. Days later, word spread across the kingdom. Elara Voss, the common-born reformer, was imprisoned in the Tower of Elthorn, pending trial. Some said the queen had tried to pardon her before her death, but was too weak to sign the decree. Others whispered that the prince himself had intervened to ensure she lived, that he had visited her cell at night, not as an enemy, but as a man burdened by his own ruin. No one ever saw that meeting, but the record shows this. A royal guard testified that when Adrian entered the tower, Elara was seated calmly, her hands folded, a faint smile on her lips. When he left an hour later, he was pale as snow, his eyes hollow. He never returned to court again. Weeks passed. On the morning of the Queen's funeral, a royal decree was read before the people, written in her hand before her passing. It restored Elara's honor, named her guardian of the new orphanage system, and stripped the High Council of its power to condemn without evidence. When Elara was released, the same nobles who once spat at her bowed low. Adrian, now a faded shadow of himself, stood among them. And in that moment, before the entire court, in the same hall where he'd once humiliated her, he knelt, took her hand, and kissed her ring. The gesture wasn't romantic. It was surrender.
Elara said nothing. She simply looked down at him, not with hatred, but with the weary compassion of someone who has seen too much to hate anymore.
History would later call her the Iron Reformer. Some said she forgave him. Others said she never spoke his name again. But what remained undeniable was this. Power, once used to humiliate, had been reclaimed through patience, truth, and the kind of strength no crown could command. In every age, arrogance believes it is immortal, until humility teaches it silence. Power built on cruelty always collapses, but dignity born from pain endures. And if you found this story as haunting and human as history itself, subscribe to our channel for more true tales of pride, betrayal, and redemption. Stories that remind us that even in the darkest halls of power, justice sometimes wears an unexpected face.